A few more people have just joined us. That's awesome. Super excited to be here. My name is Mariana Perez, and I am a park interpreter specialist for California State Parks. And today we are going to be visiting Montaña de Oro State Park virtually. And this is really exciting times. I mean, it's challenging, but also this gives us an opportunity to reach our audience, or to widen our audience by reaching people who aren't in this area, so who don't live in San Luis Obispo Coast District area. So super excited again to be here. Hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy during these times, and remembering to practice social distancing as well as washing your hands frequently. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this Coast to Couch program featuring the Spooner Ranch House. We're going to see what the ranch house was like in 1918, and our amazing docent Kathy will be portraying Katie Spooner. So super excited again to be here, and let's give a big welcome to Katie Spooner.
Hello. Let's start by having seen a photo of the ranch house, and then I'll talk about my home. So this is the Spooner Ranch House that is in San Luis Obispo County, and this is where I've lived for the last year and a half. I moved here in November 1917, right after I got married to Carlton Spooner. Carlton Spooner is the second son of Alden Bradford Spooner, the man who built this house and built this ranching enterprise on the Pecho Coast. Today, we'll tour the ranch house, and you'll get a little history of the Pecho Ranch. We'll also be able to take looks at photographs that Alden Bradford Spooner, my father-in-law, took over the years. So as I've said, I've lived in this ranch house for about a year and a half. I moved here after I got married in November 1917 to Carlton. And these months that I've lived here have been quite full. The war to end all wars ended last November, but we were not able to go celebrate the end of the Great War on Armistice Day in San Luis Obispo because of the Spanish flu epidemic. And it came in October of 1918, and we thought it went away, but then just a few months ago, it came back. And so we've been taking care here out at the Pecho Ranch. No one has gotten sick, and no one has died. And I'm happy to say that my family, the Peterson family, my parents and my 9 siblings, who all live in San Luis Obispo area, have not gotten sick either. So we'll come back to the ranch house, but let's start with the next photograph. And here is a photograph that will give you a nice sense of where the ranch house is. The ranch house is the building sort of center to the right that's white. That's the ranch house. And let me tell you about a few other things in this photo. Of course, you see the large barns, and way over to the left on the photo is the first dairy building built on this ranch with the water wheel attached. And then if you go all the way to the left side of the photo, up in the corner, you see a barn. And then below that barn, there's like a trestle that's built out into the water. Now that's Pecho Landing, and that was built by my father-in-law when he first came here in 1892 after he had planted crops and needed a good way to get the crops to market. And he needed to do it by boat because the road wasn't there then. And so this was the landing he's built. And we'll get a closer view of that a little later. And then let's go to the next photo. So this photo, I love this photo. It's a picture of the Spooner family in front of the 3-room cabin that my father-in-law built with his brother Cornelius in 1892 when he first came to this land. In 1892, A.B. Spooner, his wife Mary, and 3 boys were living in Morro Bay. And my father-in-law had the opportunity to lease 2,000 acres, which included where the house is today and the cove that's there. And the first thing he did in 1892 was plant some beans and barley, and then build this house with his brother. It's a 3-room cabin initially, and he made the landing, the Pecho landing. As I said, in 1892, he leased 2,000 acres. Now here in 1917, he owns 9,000 acres. Today, the Pecho Ranch is a dairy. We have beef cattle, hogs, sheep, goats, and horses. The crops that we grow are hay, oats, barley, beans, potatoes, and corn. When I came here in 1917, we were growing lots of beans for the war effort. The government was paying 30 cents a pound for beans, so many farmers in San Luis Obispo were growing beans to send to Europe for the soldiers. Here in this picture of the 3-room cabin, it's a photo of the Spooner family. And I'll go from the left to the right. The young man standing is Carlton Spooner, that's my husband. And next to him seated is his grandmother, Roxanne Gilmore Spooner. And the woman standing is Mary White Spooner, his mother. And there is A.B. Spooner seated with my youngest brother-in-law, Aldi, on his lap. And then next to him standing is my other brother-in-law, my older brother-in-law, Quincy. So that is the Spooner family. A.B. Spooner and Mary White were married in 1881 and lived in Morro Bay, and then came out to the Pecho Coast. As I said, when they came out here, one of the first things they did was build this landing. So let's look at the next photograph of this landing so you can get a better idea of how it worked. It was built on the bluff. A barn was built on the bluff to store the crops that were ready to go to market until a schooner could come in. And the way they made this landing work is there was a hole that was dug through the bluff down, and the trellis attached, and then schooners could come up. As you see, there's a skirt that lowers down. It helps to keep the ship away from the rocks. So that was built by A.B. Spooner, my father-in-law, but he also allowed the other farmers on the Pecho Coast to use this way of getting their crops out. They just needed to pay 75 cents a ton. Now let's go into the ranch house. The ranch house, how it is today. This is the living room, and it also is part of the original 3-room cabin. So that 3-room cabin that we saw a picture of this was the main room of that cabin, and off this main room are 2 bedrooms. In this picture, you'll notice there is a photograph, 2 photographs in the middle and the back, and the one to the left is my father-in-law, A.B. Spooner, and the one to his right is his wife, Mary. I said they were married in 1881, moved out here onto the Pecho Coast in 1892 with their 3 sons. But Mary, I never had a chance to meet my mother-in-law. She died in 1898 from the influenza. She was sick in the winter and then died in April of 1898. So my husband's grandmother, Roxanne, she was in that Hodo in the cabin too. She came out to the house to help with the boys and help her son. But tragedy hit again, and in November of 1898, Roxana died too. So my father-in-law and his 3 sons were left without women to care for them and cook for them. But fortunately, just about a mile away, my father-in-law had a friend, Mr. Pettit. And Mr. Pettit was talking to him about his daughter, Georgia Thompson, and her misfortune in marrying somebody who had TB and died 2 months after the wedding, so that now Georgia Thompson was going to come back and live with her father, but she needed a job. And could Georgia Thompson help out AB at the ranch house? And certainly she could and did, and still does today. So around 1900, she came to the ranch house and is still here today. So let's move on to the next photograph. And in this photograph, we're in the living room still, but there's with a view down to the dining room. And the dining room is the first addition to the house that was built in about 1902, 1903. And what I'd like to talk about now is that photograph at the very end on the wall in the dining room. So let's have a close-up view of that photograph. So we can talk about the dairy operation that was started in about 1894. Now, I love this photo because it shows all of the dairy at that time. It shows the dairy cows. And then in the middle of the photo, you see the dairy workers, many of them seated on their one-leg milking stools. And then in the front of the photo, you see the bull. And then in the back on the left is the dairy building. And that's the same dairy building that was in the photo that we saw before. Now, if you can take a close look at that, at the cows, you'll notice that they all have coal horns. And please don't tell me that they're steers. One day when I was showing this photo to someone at the ranch house, he told me, oh, those must be steers because they have horns. Well, no, they're cows. This photo was taken in the late 1890s, and dehorning cows was not customary until 1910. Now, dehorning cows, people wanted to dehorn cows because cows can hurt each other with their horns. They can hurt humans with their horns, and they could get stuck in fences. But what I like about this photo is these cows all have horns, and they all seem very calm and settled with the people that work with them. I think one of the reasons why that is they gave names to all these cows. And by giving names to cows, you're more personal with them. And when you milk them, the cows actually will give you more milk. So we're going to go and have a different look at the dairy building from the other side. And here we are. I think this photo was taken on the same day. And there you see the cows still, and then you see the dairy building with the water wheel. In the dairy building is where the butter is made, so that's where the milk is separated and the butter is churned. And the water wheel is the power used to do that. You can see on the side of the building a pulley, a round pulley, and I don't think you can see because you can't see very well the belts, but in the water wheel was attached through those inside, and we have an inside photo we'll look at, and you'll see how that works. But one other thing I wanted to point out to you in this photo, you see the water wheel, and then next to the water wheel you see a fencing, sort of a corral, and that's where you could corral the hogs when you were making butter. And there is that line from the dairy building down into the corral, which is a flume, and you can send down that flume the waste from making the butter. So you have whey, skim milk, and buttermilk, and you use those to fatten up the hogs. So you put the hogs down there, they get fattened up with the waste from making butter. And there's a joke around here that dairy farmers make more off their fattened hogs than they do off of their dairy products. I don't know if that's true. Here at the Pecho Ranch, we make about 100 pounds of butter a week to send into San Luis Obispo. So let's take a look at the inside of the dairy building, which is the next photograph. And here we are in the inside of the dairy building, and you can see the belts and the pulleys attached to the separator. And then you know what's outside is the water wheel. So the power of the water wheels goes through the belts and the pulley to the separator and separates the milk. And then there's another way that they connect, the workers connect a device to churn the butter. And these workers in the background, one is holding a butter paddle, and those are butter boxes. And as I said, we made about 100 pounds of butter. We make about 100 pounds of butter a week. Now, the water wheel. How is the water wheel powered? We have another photo that I can show you, talk more about that. And this photo is a picture of a dam that was built by my father-in-law on Islay Creek, about a mile and a quarter up the creek. And in order to make a water wheel run smoothly, you have to make a dam so that you have water that you can use to run down flumes and have a consistent flow of water, so it's a consistent amount of energy for separating the milk and churning the butter. Now, this dairy building that we've been looking at and this water wheel is not what we use today in 1917 on the Pecho Ranch. We have a much more modern facility that was built a few years ago. We now have a cement dairy building, and the churner and the separator are powered by a 2-horsepower gasoline motor. And my brother-in-law, Aldi, the one in charge of the animals on the farm, is always looking for ways to enhance the milk production and the making of butter. He recently bought 58 Holstein cows from Wisconsin because they give a lot of milk. And I'll talk a little more about what else Aldi is doing in this next slide. So this next slide is a good aerial view of the ranch. In the lower left-hand corner is where the house is. But I also want to point out the 2 silos, those white little silos down on the right side. They are instrumental in being able to have more milk from our cows. Cows were traditionally milked only in the green months, so from October to June. And then there was no grass for the cows to eat, so they weren't milked. But a farmer needs to make as much as he can from his cows. So if you feed the cows during the non-green months, then you can get more milk. So in these silos, they made silage that they could feed to the cows whenever there wasn't grass for the cows to eat. In this photo, I hope you're also looking at the flat terraces that you see on the coast there that are just perfect for planting the crops. And now let's go back to the house, go back into the dining room of the house. So here we are in the dining room, and as I mentioned before, the dining room was the first addition to the 3-room cabin. When it was added on in 1902, it was added on as a kitchen and an eating area and a place for Georgia Thompson to be, to sleep when she eventually moved into the house. One interesting feature of this room is the California cooler, which we use as a way to keep our fruits and vegetables and processed meats for longer. So here's a picture of that California cooler. Maybe you have one in your house and know how it works. So I'll just explain for the others how it works. It is built on the north side of the house. It's a box outside of the house. And as you note, in the bottom there are holes, and then up on the top there are holes. And those holes were made to allow air in and out. And in the bottom, the cool air comes in from the coast. And as it gets warm, it rises, and it rises up to the top and then goes out the top. And this rising of the cool air creates a convection of cool air. And if you were there in the house with me, you could touch that glass and you could feel how cool it actually is in the cooler. So let's move on into the kitchen now. This is our kitchen, and the kitchen was part of the second addition to the ranch house, and it was built in 1912. In 1912, not only was this kitchen built, but there was room built for Georgia Thompson to sleep, and then in the front of their house, there was an addition of a headquarters added on. 1912 was a big year out here on the Petro for Petro Ranch. It was the year that A.B. Spooner incorporated his business into the Petro Ranch and Stock Company. All three sons were old enough then to become officers of the corporation, and A.B. Spooner was the president. The three sons each had their own duty on the farm. Aldi, my youngest brother-in-law, he is in charge of all the animals. Carlton, my husband, he is in charge of all things mechanical, the tractors, the trailers, the cars and the trucks that we now have. And then the older brother-in-law, Quincy, is in charge of all the buildings. So they incorporated and were able at the time to build this proper kitchen that Georgia Thompson tells me she was so excited when it happened. It's a good, easy to work in kitchen. I like the big sink and the wood burning stove. Over to the right and then to the left, we have a Hoosier, which we'll get a closer look at in a moment. This is a kitchen now that was Georgia Thompson's, and now with me and my sister-in-law Glenn, it's the kitchen for three women, and we're making it work. Georgia is well known for her desserts, and so Glenn and I are bringing something else in. I'm very good at cooking meats and fish, so we're all doing what works well. I wanted to show you this new tool I got for the kitchen, and it is a great tool to have when you at this ranch, because we have both beef cattle and hogs. So this is a larding needle. As I said, we have beef cattle, and the beef is very tasty, but it can be a bit dry. So we have hogs, and from the hogs we have lard, and I can cut little strips of lard called lardoons, put it in my larding needle, and take the needle, insert it into a roast of beef, and then as I take the needle out, I use this little slide to make sure that the lard stays in the roast. And I do that about 4 to 6 times, have many lardoons in that roast, and it sure makes the roast juicy and good. Now I want to talk about the irons that you see in this photo. You see 2 different kinds of irons. And why would you need 2 different kinds of irons? Because we have preferences. I like to use the flat iron that is on the left. I have 2, and it's easy. You put the irons on the heat and then change over. One's on the heat and one you're using, and then you change over. And the other iron is known as a box iron. Now that's the iron that Georgia Thompson likes. And to use a box iron, you have to open it up. You take at the front of the iron, you use the clamp, open it up, and then you take hot coals from the stove and put it inside of the iron. It's a lot of work. Don't like to do it. And once I tried to use it, Georgia telling me it works so well, but unfortunately, must have been eucalyptus wood in the iron. The spark popped out and burned my shirt. So I just use my flat irons. What iron do you prefer? I also would like to show you a close-up of the Hoosier in this photograph here. This Hoosier is the first piece of kitchen furniture that has been in this ranch house. And I like this Hoosier because not only does it have a board that you can pull out from the center, it's not open now, but there's another board you can pull out so you have a bigger cutting surface, but it has a dry sink so that if we have wet items, we can put them there and they're not going to drip all over the floor. This Hoosier also has a bin on the right side that pulls out. You can see our coffee grinder on the left and our flour dispenser there. So it's very handy and useful to use. I hear nowadays people are just beginning to build these kind of things actually into the kitchen. So you don't take it with you if you leave the house, it just stays there. But we have this and we can take it if we ever leave this house. I also want you to notice on top of the Hoosier, to the sides are two pictures, nothing special about that, but in the center, those are butter churns. Now, fortunately, we don't need to have butter churns in our kitchen because we have an actual dairy and we get butter from the dairy. But it is interesting to note the styles of the butter churns. And let's go further on in the house into Georgia Thompson's room. And this is Georgia Thompson's room, part of that second edition. The wall to the right is the wall between her bedroom and the kitchen. And you'll note that she has a Singer sewing machine there as she does the mending for the household, which is great to have. And then there you see in the back, and we have a close-up of this, her basin, her pitcher, and her chamber pot. When her room was built, there was no indoor plumbing. So she had these things, and she still uses them today. I guess she's used to them. So let's wander through the house more and go to my father-in-law's bedroom, A.B. Spooner's bedroom. And you can see his bed and his dresser. But one thing I want to point out to you is the photo in the picture. And that photo, you can see my father-in-law on one of his horses, and he is riding with a woman, Elvira Parr, who is the daughter of a friend of his that he met up in San Francisco. The horse that he is on is a standard bred horse, and they're made for sulky riding, and he does like to race his sulky. He's been with horses all of his life, and he breeds horses on the ranch today. You can see in the other picture a horse of his. So he's been with horses and he's loved horses. It's so much that once, before he got married to Mary, A.B. Spooner went up to San Francisco to train with a famous horse trainer named A.H. Rockwell. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a bridleless and no harness horse trainer. My father-in-law was interested in that, went up to San Francisco and spent about a year training with him. And my father-in-law was thinking about going up to the Pacific Northwest with A.H. Rockwell and helping him train folks up there. But he decided to stay in San Francisco and have his own livery stable for a while. And that was a good thing that he stayed, because A.H. Rockwell and his party, when they left the Pacific Northwest, they left by boat, and when they were rounding the Olympic Peninsula to begin coming south back down to California, the boat broke and sunk, and everybody drowned, and all the horses. Very sad, and I'm just very happy that my father-in-law wasn't on that boat. So let's see more of the house. We're going to go to the third edition. This is the hallway. in the third edition of the house, which is a bedroom wing. And this is where my husband and I live, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live. You look down the hallway, the first door to the right is the bathroom. The second door to the right is the bedroom of Aldi and Glenn. And the door to the left is the bedroom of Carlton and me. So let's go into that bedroom. This is our bedroom. This is where we sleep, and this is where we read. You'll see in the foreground of this photo what we have in our bedroom. As I said, my husband loves all things mechanical. It is a separator, like the one that was in the old dairy, and he's fond of it. We sleep and we read in here, and I just wanted to talk about this new book I got, Bunchgrass, by Horace Ansley Vachel. You might have heard of him. He's an author. He's a gentleman who lived in San Luis Obispo County from about 1880 to 1900. And then he went back to England, where he was from, and started writing fiction. So this is a book that was published in 1914 that he wrote. It's short stories, as I said, called Bunchgrass. And it takes place in a fictionalized county called San Lorenzo. Well, if you read this book, you soon realize that San Lorenzo is very similar to San Luis Obispo County. And in one of these short stories called Pap Spooner, you really get an idea that Horace Vachel knew my father-in-law. You read about Pap Spooner, and just like my father-in-law, his first initial is A, his wife has died, and no one is a match for Spooner in a horse, cattle, or pig deal. Described my father-in-law exactly. So that's my tour of the ranch house. And now we'll go to one last photo, and I'll take off my hat and my Katie hairdo, and I'll be Kathy Flock, docent, to show you the picture. This is a picture of the actual Katie Spooner, her only surviving child, Donald, and Carlton, her husband. They lived in the ranch house until 1942, when it was sold by all three of the brothers and all the land. And that's what I have today for you. If you have any questions, be happy to take them.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh,
Kathy.
You're welcome.
Now you can see me. That was an awesome presentation. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section on your screen. If you have any questions about the Spooner Ranch House or about Katie Spooner, this ranch house, again, is located in Montaña de Oro State Park, which means Mountain of Gold, because of the beautiful wild yellow flowers that bloom in the spring and cover all of the hillsides. So it's a fantastic place to come and visit. I know it's difficult to visit our parks right now, but when everything starts going back to normal, maybe this will be a place you're interested in checking out and getting to see the Spooner Ranch House in person. Kathy also does a living history. So she does this right at the Spooner Ranch House when it is open. And so her schedule usually comes out in the Adventures with Nature. So maybe in the future, there'll be a live presentation that we can all go and visit. We do have a question and from one of our participants, and the question is, are any other original buildings left?
Yes, the secondary building is on the property now, but all other there is a barn out just outside of the property that was outside of the park that was probably part of the Spooner Ranch. But the other buildings were torn down when the ranch became part of the park system, and mainly because it was just too dangerous to have them up. I was I was very sad. I'm very sad that the silos aren't there. But they tore down the silos and they put them to good use, and they made the bathrooms out of them.
Awesome. We have another question from Ravishana. How did the dairy crew clean the equipment, and how often was it done?
I don't know, and I think that changed over time, though, as people learned how important it was to keep things clean for the milk production. They got cleaner and cleaner over time. And I suspect that one of the reasons why the dairy was moved from the Petro Coast into Edna was for hygiene, that the demands by the public was that things had to be more hygienic and that it could be easier there. But I don't really know, but it could have been one thing.
And then one other attendee said, "Great job, Kathy."
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, another one popped in. When was a road put in?
So the road was really passable by 1914. So the story of the road is that when Spooner moved to the Petro Coast, where the land is, he petitioned the county to build a road from Los Osos to his house. However, his neighbor, Alexander Hazard, wasn't so interested in a road going to Spooner's house. He wanted the road to go all the way to Avila. So he wouldn't give permission for right-of-way through his land. He wouldn't allow that right away, but eventually he did. And I think by 1910 to 1914, the road was there. And by 1914, they were not using Bouchon Landing because there was a road.
Awesome. And we have another comment saying, "Very interesting and presented so well. Thank you." That's awesome. We appreciate that type of feedback. Any other questions?
I see this feedback where somebody wrote that they visited the ranch house last summer and had fun counting all the cows that are placed around and inside the house. And it is this fun game that some brilliant docents put together where we have these little cows and they are standing on a platform that says their name, and the names of the cows that we have in the house are the names of the cows that you saw in those photos. And those cows are hidden all over the house, and kids can come in, and if they find all the cows, and they read the information about the dairy, then we give them a gift of a pencil.
That's awesome. All right, just one more minute for any last minute questions or comments. Okay. Well, I'm also going to quickly share the last page of the PowerPoint, and this page basically has all of our social media. We do offer Coast to Couch programs twice a week, usually on Thursday at 10 a.m. and then Saturdays at 2 p.m. We really appreciate you attending this awesome program, and thank you again, Kathy, for presenting as Katie Spooner. Really, that was amazing and very informative. I enjoyed it. And if you're interested in more programs, please check out our Facebook pages, the event section, where more programs will be listed. Again, thank you for attending, and have a lovely rest of your weekend.
Thank you, Mariana.
You're welcome. And